What's up, Cerebral football fans? My name is Steven Hyder. This is Gate City Sports Channel. And we're going to talk defensive backs, guys. We're going to continue on with this idea, this notion of if we're going to stay put or just a very small, move forward, like who are the prospects around that 22 range? So we're talking about after pick 16 and probably really more specifically somewhere around between picks 18 through about 22. If we made a small leap forward, like who would be the players that would actually be in that range. Yesterday, we talked about Fontano, who's a guy that Jeff Stoutland's brought in twice to talk to. And today, I want to take some time and I want to talk about Iowa corner, nickel, safety, jack of all trades, Cooper DeJean. Now, the first thing I want to start off by saying is this. I do think if you're going to draft this young man, you have to have a position in mind for him, okay? You can't just say, like, let's just see how our defense looks and then we'll plug him in where we feel comfortable. I don't love that concept. I think the concept is that you have a defined role. You think he's a strong safety in the league. You think he's a boundary corner in the league. You think he's a tall slot corner in the league. Like, you got to have a plan. I'm not here to knock anyone's plan. I think every team could be different in the way they view him. Some teams could see him as this dude would be a really good, strong safety. Some teams would be like, yo, this dude is going to be a really good off-coverage, zone-based boundary corner. That's where, the kind of the beauty in this prospect lies, but also maybe some of the difficulty. And, obviously he did a lot of good at his pro day. I think his pro day has definitely kind of reemerged his name. I'm not saying from the scouting world, guys, more so in the media, but now we're seeing more people are kind of warming themselves back up once again to the idea of Cooper DeJean. The first thing I want to start with is really productive guy. So when I went back, I took a look at 2 years for this prospect, right? And I just wanted to see, like, where did he get cooked? What game was he really cooked in? And to my surprise, the only game that I really, when I was like kind of doing this and going through it, and I was like, okay, like this is going to require a little explanation here in terms of what happened, what occurred. Gave up 100 yards. He gave up a single 100-yard game that occurred in 2022 versus Ohio State, but he was targeted 8 times in that game and only gave up 3 completions. Obviously, at least one of those completions had to be a pretty big one. It looks like to me, because you can see the yards after reception, there was probably a missed tackle or a failed attempt at a tackle that led to that yardage number there. So it's probably not quite as bad as that number makes you seem. But I do want to get into the evaluation of him, because in this system, you got to be able to tackle, especially as a boundary corner. We all love James Bradbury back in 2022. Bradbury gave effort, but he's never been specifically like a great short zone tackling kind of, come up and run fit kind of guy. And I do think that in Vic Fangio's scheme in particular, guys, that is something that needs to be done. But as I was looking through here, I see like 2023 season, let me count how many guys he had. Quite a few games where he held his opponents under 25 yards in reception, 25 receiving yards. I mean, that's impressive, guys. When you start seeing numbers like that, you got to definitely give, his first 3 games, everybody was under 25 yards, okay? Has back-to-back games where he gives up 28 yards, gives up 17 yards, which is his 4th game holding an opponent under 25 yards, gave up 61, which is only one of a handful of games over the last 2 years he's given up more than 50, gives up 12 yards, 11 yards, and then no yards with Rutgers, but it doesn't really look like he was targeted other than twice there. So 7 games out of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 7 out of 10 games, guys, he held opponents to under 25 yards of receiving yards. I should state there. That is that's impressive, man. Like that's not a fluke. When you see a guy like that, it doesn't necessarily mean 100% it's going to translate. The play level gets higher in the NFL, but I can say definitively from a college perspective, this dude was a really good college football player. There's no doubt in my mind when you're putting up this kind of statistical output. I know statistics aren't everything, but when you see a consistency like this, I'm going to call him the anti-Rager. Rager had this really big inconsistency in his production, right? Where you counted how many games he had over 50 yards, how many games he had over 70 yards, how many games he had over 100 yards receiving. It was all based upon his physical measurements and what we thought he could be in the league and kind of that vertical element to him. But we overlooked those inconsistencies in terms of the production, and we got burnt by Rager. I'm going to call this guy the anti-Rager because the production is clearly there. Now, you could also say, well, isn't that just basically JJ, Steve? Or take a Whiteside? We'll leave that one alone, guys. We don't need to talk about JJ. That's why you don't trust the pack, guys. Always be a little skeptical of the pack. With that said, this young man, there's a lot to discuss here, which is, I talked about this and I've already kind of indicated this. I do think that he is a specific fit for certain types of scheme. I think if you were a very man-heavy scheme, you probably are going to be a little off on Cooper DeJean, right? Like this is very much a projection because on the season, he played 388 coverage snaps. Of those 388 coverage snaps, only 64 were in what they consider to be man snaps. I want to get into this a little bit, guys, because that can be a little confusing, but just stick with me for a minute and I'll provide more context to that. That works as well. It's about 16.5% of his snaps played in man coverage. So obviously, if you're in a heavy man coverage system, you're going to have to project a little bit here, right? You're projecting off of what his film showed you in terms of the underlying athleticism, not necessarily the production from being in that specific scheme, if you will. Good for the Eagles. We are definitely a quarters-based scheme that can rotate into cover 3. You know, Vic Fangio loves that cover 6 look. And then, you know, obviously he'll play some cover 1 here and there as well. And you'll see some Tampa 2, and you'll see some cover 2 from Vic. This is going to be more of a scheme and a system with Victor where you're going to be playing with the ball in front of you, especially if you're going to play that boundary side, right? That's where he likes to play that cover 6 side too, where he's got the half side locked up on the next, you know, the number 1 receiver for a team. You got a guy like Cooper DeJean over on that side or James Bradbury, and then you got the safety help above him. So that way you're trying to force the receiver to cross the corner's face. So you just want a guy that can be productive in that kind of role, if you will, because you're going to get a lot of, they're either going to try to, you know, basically run some things that are going to be like kind of a two-way setup in terms of the route. So like think of like a stop and go, think of like a corner post corner, those, you know, where you got those double moves kind of going in to basically take advantage of the coverage, or you're trying to cross in front of that corner's face, right? You're trying to get in between that zone area, right? You want to basically be able to get in front of the corner's face, but also keep your distance behind that kind of apex, you know, defender who's going to drop back as well. You know, quarterback's got to be very smart with the ball placement there. With that said, if you're the Eagles, you like this. This is not turning you off the fact that this young man was a very much a zone heavy corner. He was very productive. I mean, I think one year he had like 5 interceptions. I think last year I'm going to say he had like 2 or 3, something like that, guys. I'm going to say that some of that's probably because the targets drastically went down against him. But also, I will say that although he played in the big, and the big has to be respected, I will say this year was missing Michigan and was missing Ohio State. You got to be a little careful, you know, but he did play Iowa State, who's normally a very, you know, prominent offensive heavy, you know, team from the bigs. I mean, there are some elements there, but I will say that the competition in 23 wasn't quite as impressive as the competition was in 22, to where he was definitely going through the gauntlet there. Let's talk about a boundary corner. What's up, my guy, Mike? Hey, I appreciate you, Mike, bro. I hope everything's going well, man. Hey, we'll do some draft coverage, man. You got to hit me up, bro. We'll do some draft coverage, man. We'll try to get LB and maybe Fresh on the line. Let's do some draft coverage. I want to talk about boundary. Let's talk about boundary corner, what the heck that means, okay? When you hear the word boundary, just understand this. In most systems, it's just a right cornerback. In the Philadelphia Eagles, I'm not too sure that in previous coordinators that they really differentiated boundary from field as much as they did just from right cornerback to left cornerback. It was kind of, think of Nick Sirianni's quote about receivers. They're alignmentless. He wants them to be able to do every alignment. You know what I mean? With that said, when you're talking about a boundary corner compared to a field corner, you're talking about a difference in the hips. You're talking about a difference in the length, the way that they play with reach, things like that, guys. There are some physical attributes that can be different. Now, of course, there are always guys like Quinion Mitchell. There's always going to be guys like in this draft class, like Arnold, Terrion Arnold. Like those guys are kind of tweeners where they could probably play either. They could play as a field. They could play as a boundary to kind of have both sides to this. I will tell you the one thing that, you know, ball production is there with Cooper DeJean, right? I mean, he's got a lot of pass breakups. I think he had like 8 and then 5, 8 the year prior. I think like 5 this past year. You know, I think he had like 5 interceptions and 3. So, I mean, he's been a very productive player. I mean, he can get his hands on the football. Arm reach is not the issue, 31.13 inches in the arm reach. So he's got a little bit of that reach. And if you're thinking about that, guys, just think about the way the Eagles used to like to isolate Alshon Jeffrey when he was still Alshon. The way they used to love to isolate him on the boundary, guys, locked up on a corner, and then he would just basically, like he's playing in the post, right? He's down there playing in the post, guys, and he was just using that wingspan to basically, no matter how tight the coverage was, to basically get those third down conversions when Alshon was Alshon, before the injuries finally set in and he just kind of lost. He wasn't the same guy anymore. With that said, I will give you one concern I truly have about this young man, right? Everything lines up 6 foot, 6'1", 200, 205-ish pounds. He's in that range. I mean, the guy has the feel of a boundary corner, but I don't know his wingspan. And I do think wingspan is pretty dang important when you're talking about the boundary. All right. You don't need an exceptional wingspan. You just would like to see a boundary corner be about 76 inches or higher in the wingspan. And the wingspan, comes from obviously that chest area, broadness of the shoulders, and then, of course, your arm reach there. That's going to come down to, the weight room. This is some of the things that we talked about, Kelly Ringo potentially becoming a boundary corner. And I told you guys, the only concern I have there is he's already like 6'1", 6'2"-ish, 210-pound-ish. And he's only got a 74-inch wingspan. So that kind of, I'm like, I'm not a sports science guy. I'm not here to put these guys in a weight room and talk about how much they can or can't grow. That's not my role, guys. I'm a coach. I don't do strength training. That's, I did the same thing you guys did between the military and playing sports. Of course, you're introduced to that, but I'm far from being an expert there. So I don't know. That's where you get a guy into a weight room in the NFL, and you just got to see where their body development goes over a couple of years, if you will. I think Cooper DeJean, you're kind of, we don't know. We just don't know the wingspan, guys. I didn't see definitive data that talked about his actual wingspan. I would think that there's a reason to believe he's somewhere close to at least 76 inches in terms of the wingspan, just given the body type. But if you would have given me all the measurements on Kelly Ringo, now mind you, I think age plays a part of Kelly Ringo because he's so freaking young. But if you give me all his measurements and you were like, yo, Steve, guess his wingspan, I would have definitely said like 77, 76, and he's got like 74-inch wingspan, guys. So I've learned my lesson to be a little careful with projections in terms of physical measurements because you can be wrong, simply put. People are different. The way they're built is different. All right. What I will say about Cooper DeJean is I'm hearing some movement, some word coming in that he may not be there at 22, but I think he's in the range. My thing is somebody's going to fall. Somebody has to fall outside the top 20. They can't, they're projecting more than 20 guys. So clearly somebody is going to fall further than they're expecting, right? We covered prospect number 1, which we talked about right guard, and if they would actually potentially move this prospect out to right tackle eventually to replace Lane. We went over that topic yesterday. This guy's been in for 2 meetings. He's got a top 30 visit. He's met with Stout a couple times now. Like we did that discussion. Now it's time, I think, to talk about corners, guys. I think corner is very, very important. I think boundary corner is where they're looking. And I don't want to make this about other prospects, but there are a few other guys that I've looked at for potential boundary corners. Because I think that if they're going to, like Kelly Ringo was playing mostly last year on the field. So if they're going to continue his development on the field side where Slade normally plays, probably means that we need another outside option at cornerback. And I will go internal to the roster because I do think you guys deserve to know some of the, just the measurements to some of these guys and kind of the way they stack up in terms of our roster. Who do I, you keep saying this, Steve, then who's the boundary corners on the Eagles? Bradbury's the boundary corner right now. Behind him, you have 2 guys that have the prototypical measurements of boundary corners. Okay, Eli Ricks. I know he played a ton of slot last year. I do think that he is ultimately an outside corner, and I do think that he has the measurements that make you think that Eli Ricks is a boundary corner. I don't know what the Eagles think long-term about him, guys. It's not for me to decide. I'm just talking about the prospects as they come, what might be on the board, their strengths, their weaknesses, the unknowns, that kind of stuff, guys. Mekhi Garner is the other guy. Mekhi Garner could potentially be moved. Same thing we talk about, with Cooper DeJean. You could potentially play Mekhi Garner as a strong safety as well. You could play him as a tall nickel as well. He's a very good special teams player. What I will say is that these 3 guys, James Bradbury, Eli Ricks, and Mekhi Garner, are the guys that have the prototypical body types that you see from a boundary corner. All right. Then you got your field corners, Darius Slay, Isaiah Rodgers, Kelly Ringo, Josh Jobe. Josh Jobe has the ability. He's got a little bit of flexibility to play boundary or field, to be quite honest. I don't think you don't have to necessarily lock him to one side. I think he's kind of a tweener personally. I think Kelly Ringo, depending on if you could develop that wingspan a little bit more, Kelly Ringo, a little tall, gets a little tight hip because of that length when he's in his back pedal. But nonetheless, the young man, his straight line speed is really quick. And if you could get that guy to add just a couple more inches to his, wingspan, that's a guy that could compete on the boundary to be as well. But right now, this is where they're playing him. Isaiah Rodgers, he's more of a tweener between being essentially a field corner or a slot. I know he hasn't played a ton at slot, guys. He's very inexperienced there, but he has all the lateral movement abilities and the size profile that you would see from either a field corner or a slot corner. The difference is that playing at traffic from the slot position is different, guys. So I don't know if he's comfortable playing through that traffic. Darius Slay talked about that last year, that physically he's able to do it, but there's a mental preparation to dealing with the traffic inside. that he was still adjusting to himself, and that's why he doesn't carry as much as maybe the fan base like we wanted him to. That's part of the reason why he didn't carry so much. In terms of slot corners on the roster currently, guys, you have Tyler Hall, Isaiah Rodgers, Tywan Mullen, Mario Goodrich, Zach McPherson, and then, of course, we just signed back Avonte Maddox. So that's kind of the way the roster is stacking up. A lot of darts to throw at the dart board. I'm not too sure there's a lot of answers. I would say this. I would take a wild guess if they draft a corner in the first round. And we're not only going to talk about Cooper DeJean before the draft. We're going to talk about a couple other corners at potential first-round grades on them. If you're going to draft a dude in the first round, I would assume you're probably moving on from James Bradbury and you're probably going to take the hit after June 1st. I would assume that. I don't know, but that would be my assumption because of where you're picking the player. The fact that you got to get younger. There's already been talks that we've got to start playing younger players a little earlier than we've been doing and kind of ripping that Band-Aid off and getting some experience in there. I just think if you put all those tea leaves together, to me, that makes sense. The last thing before we jump into comments, guys, I promise you we'll get to your comments, guys. The last thing I'll talk about when it comes to Cooper DeJean is the low boundary. We talked a little bit about James Bradbury here. I think he's a willing tackler. I think he can play with a little bit of force. You know, he can come up and play the run. He's decent at run fits. But I will tell you that there are some little things on his film to where technique-wise there's some improvement here. I do think that he could use some functional strength in an NFL weight room if I'm being real. I don't think he's necessarily a fully developed guy in terms of like that short zone run fit type stuff, right? I mean, I do think there's some development that needs to happen in a Vic Fangio scheme for him, but in coverage, this young man's really, really good. With that said, let's talk a little bit, guys. Let's open it up. Let's have our discussions. And if I get kicked off of here early, I just want to give you guys a warning. I do have a tornado watch in effect right now. So we're going to go until the tornado blows down my walls, apparently. All right, let's go, guys. What's up, China? How you doing? Coach Steve with the back-to-back content. I love it. Hey, man, I appreciate y'all. Thank you so much. Lambaroo said, DeJean is who I want in the first, him or Latu. Latu. I don't know how you say his name. It was Latu or Latu. What's up, Mike? How you doing, buddy? Love Latu. Yeah, there's a couple of guys out there that the issue with Latu is going to, or Latu, I don't know if I'm saying his name correctly, guys. I think the issue there is going to be is the medical grade on him. I think a lot of people have already discussed that one. We can have an episode before the draft if you guys want to talk about him. And his numbers are pretty good production-wise, but I think going back to Washington when they would not medically clear him, you're going to have to do your homework there. Now, you could say a gate, but we did gamble on Josh Sweat, and boy, that paid out pretty good. Josh Sweat developed. That was a really good gamble by the Eagles. It's true. You know, if you don't risk a little, then you don't get those crazy rewards. I mean, that's very true, guys. But yeah. Yeah, I mean, we got to see how the medical grades come out. And there's no way for me to know that personally, guys, but I can go back and I can go into detail what is publicly accessible about his injury history. And then we can kind of, I'll do some research for you guys and we'll bring that up as we get closer to the draft. Latu is a dog. Cooper will be gone before 22. Maybe Jazz, but I don't know. I think it's going to depend, man. I would tend to say that I think more teams I think they're underestimating the edge rushers. Teams value edge in offensive linemen. I think that some of these edges in offensive linemen are going to get overdrafted before the corners do, personally. There's a possibility he goes a couple picks before us. I think he's in that 16 to 22 range, personally. 16, I'd say to like 24 is about the area I think he'll get drafted in. So he could go before us, but I don't think that's a full-blown conclusion, Jazz, to be honest. I like Latu, but there is no way I would take him in the first 21 picks of the first round. I like Kool-Aid more than I like his toe. Yeah, Jazz, that's unfortunate that he has the I think it's called a Jones fracture, which is on the outside part of the foot. So where, when you get a Liz Frank, it's up at the top two toes and it's in the middle, kind of almost into the middle of your foot. I think with a Jones fracture, it's more so towards the bottom two toes and it's like kind of on the outside edges of your foot. So yeah, anytime you're dealing with a foot injury with corners, that's the guy that I think that they're projecting to go in the top 20, Jazz, that I got doubts about Kool-Aid going even in the first round. It's hard to say. It's going to depend upon what he shows you in terms of like one-on-one with him. It's going to depend upon what your doctors say. It's going to depend upon if a team can afford to potentially stash him. Is there a team that's like, look, we're going to try to control this guy. We want a 5th-year option on a corner. We know he's probably not going to be ready for the majority of the season, or If he is ready, he's not going to be completely 100% because of this injury. There's so many factors on that one, Jazz, that I'm like, I'm not too sure that he's a lock to be a top 20 pick personally. 1946, Connie Mack, Eagle fan. Hello, my friend. I'm back from Argentina. What fans don't realize, this one in a lifetime kid who can multitask to the hit. Yeah, man, he's a good player and he could play a lot of different positions, a lot of different alignments. I agree with you there. And congrats on Argentina. That's pretty cool. Stay safe. I'm trying, sir. I'm trying. Below ground, listen for the sirens. Jazz, here in North Carolina, and this North Carolina clay, they don't dig down here, sir. I wish they did. Your best chances here is you just go to a center room and you hope for the best. Unfortunately. Yeah. Hug your tulip bowls, my wife says. Thank you so much, Connie Mack. I appreciate you becoming a YouTube member. That's awesome. What's up, Mom? Latu. Is it Latu? Got you, Dank. Thanks, Dank. Yeah, I haven't had a chance to like really watch his. Like I've seen him from obviously games on the season, but I haven't had a chance to really go back and watch like actual film of him yet. So I'm a little, when you get like that, you're always a little off on the pronunciation. Normally, what I like to do is like before I actually talk about them, like when I do a dedicated video to them, I like to just pull it up in Google and do the translate so I can hear how they're saying it. 19 gate, but watch Green Bay trade up. Did Kool-Aid get a top 30 visit? I don't know if he did actually. Not with the Eagles, I don't think. But let me take a look at the Eagles top 30 visits. All of the Eagles top 30 visits. Let's take a look and just see. So as of the other day, Alabama cornerback Kool-Aid McKinstry has a top 30 visit. Yeah, he does. 2 hours ago, he got a top 30 visit with the Eagles. It's been reported as of 2 hours ago. So yeah, China, he got one. Apparently, was reported just a couple hours ago with the Eagles. So yeah, I mean it's a tough one, right? Because like you can look at the Sidney Jones, which a far more serious injury, guys. I'm not trying to compare the Sidney Jones like ACL and Achilles thing. Oh, I think it was an Achilles actually with him. To just having a Jones fracture. I think those are a little different worlds. But just the basis of we gambled on Sidney Jones, it didn't work out. But I respected the gamble. And then we gambled on Josh Sweat, and that worked. It's tough with injuries, guys. It's definitely tough with injuries. It's definitely tough with injuries. No Clay, college in Iowa now. I only deal with them as hurricane spawns. Are there any really must-have players worth trading up for? I feel like most players settling in the 20s is alarming. I do think that there are players worth trading up for, to be honest. But I think the valuation gets tough because that means losing something. So are we losing the little bit of draft capital we have in terms of like the top 100 inside of this draft, right? Like I don't want to have to give up 50 or 53 just to move up a couple spots. I'm not saying that would be the price for that, but it could be. You know what I mean? Like that definitely could be something that happens there, and that worries me because I just think that this team has done a great job of addressing needs in free agency, to be honest. But I still think there's work to be done. Yeah, it's reported. Yeah, I just saw that. Yeah, 2 hours ago, they reported him coming in for a visit. Some teams apparently don't even have lay two in the first round. Yeah, I've heard that too. Easy. I don't know. I don't know where to put that one at easy when it comes to him. Like he's definitely talented. There's definitely talent there. I don't know the nature of that. I know he had an injury to his neck. I just don't know the complete nature to it. I know that he was not medically cleared again to play at Washington, and that's why he transferred out. Sometimes they get stuff wrong. We've dealt with this whole thing before with injuries to the neck, and DK Metcalf and how wrong a lot of the teams got that particular report. So teams scare off, man, with injuries easy. You know as well as I do, man. They scare off. What's up, Proud Infidel? I got you, buddy. I appreciate you, buddy. Appreciate you. Speaking of trading up, thoughts on trading back into the third from pick 120? I could see that, or depending on what's on the board with 50 or 53, if you still feel like you can get your guy by trading backwards into the third round and maybe accumulating another day three pick. I think the issue though is, from what I understand is most of the league. You can never say everybody because everyone's so different in their viewpoints on this stuff, but most of the league, from what I'm hearing, they don't love day three of this draft, and they're kind of trying to hedge for 25 and 26. So you might see teams more willing to trade day three picks this time around, just because they may not be falling in love with that depth there. But sometimes, man, guys that you think aren't going to be that, you draft them here, you get them here, and they do well. I mean, we'll see. I mean, it's definitely, yeah. He had a neck fusion, huh? Ugh, that sucks, Jazz. I'm all for being aggressive, but when you trade up 3 years in a row, at some point you're subtracting too many picks. I'd stay put this year because we've lost a three, and a four trading up in the last 3 years. Yeah, I mean, I think they're going to get a second out of the Hassan Reddick deal. It's not a guarantee, but I think that's why they did that 2026 structure with that, Bobby, to be honest. I think that's partially because they knew that Aaron Rodgers would be gone. I think that was pretty adequately explained by a few different people, where they said, like, look, Aaron Rodgers is going to probably be gone following, this season. He probably won't be back for 2025. So if you hold that 2026 pick, there's a good chance the Jets are not that great in 2025. And that, if Reddick meets the conditions to turn that 30 into a second, you're looking at a fairly favorable 2026 second. We'll see. I mean, both sides are right, Bobby. I've heard a couple of arguments on this. My thing is if you believe in a guy, you go get him. But I said it yesterday. I don't know if you caught what we were talking about that yesterday, Bobby, but I did say yesterday that, like, I don't have a problem with it, but you better be right. You know what I mean? If you go up and you move and you're giving away this kind of capital again, that dude you drafted better been a day one impact player. We can't be doing that to leverage for a guy that might not play for another year or two. I don't agree with that. I think that's not the path forward. But the organizations they're weird on these things, man. They're weird about the way they view the draft. He apparently went to a top doctor for NFL players, and they cleared him for UCLA. He's played 2 years since then, so it might not be a problem until it becomes a problem. Yeah, Dan, that's the tough part, man. Like, yeah, I don't want to play a doctor on YouTube, sir. You know what I mean? it's not my role, sir. I don't want to do that. That one makes me a little uncomfortable when it comes to him. But I do trust the fact that the Eagles, they're risky when it comes to this stuff. So I know if you hear the Eagles backed away because of it, it has to be pretty serious. But this dude's good, Dank. His film's pretty good, man. I haven't had a chance to really dive deep into, like, what happened last year in terms of, like, reviewing actual film on him, but, like, just being a college football fan and watching him during the course of last season, like, I mean, he stands out to you. Like, he's always on the highlight reel. Like, the dude was a very, very good player. I like the DeJean pick, him being able to play multiple positions. Can't be understated or underestimated, in my opinion. Easy said, I think the pick should be Guyton. You like Lane Johnson's boy? Not a sexy pick, as he has to sit for a few seasons, but he's similar to Lane and could be the best O lineman in the draft. I think he's going to require a lot more development than some of the other guys are. I've heard that same inclination, Easy, that people think he has the highest ceiling amongst all these guys. He could potentially be the best guy down the road. It's just tough, man. It's a tough sell to keep sitting these guys for years at a time. And it goes against everything we said in that conference. That Howie said, not we. Me and you and I didn't say anything Easy, but you know what I meant. Howie and them said, about being a little bit more cognizant of getting these guys reps, getting them time. I would much rather them try to dig in. If they're going to go in the 20s and draft the lineman, I'm okay in the 20s if you take a guard, especially if it's going to be a lockdown right guard that you could trust your future in. I think that guards, normally the value fits better in the second round. I'm not going to lie, Easy, but if you got a guy that you think is definitely going to elevate your offense, that run game is just going to be a difference with this dude in there, I think you take him. I think the issue being is if you start trying to talk about trading up, Easy. If you're trading up for a guard, like I said, man, I mean, I'll give the Eagles a chance to do their thing and prove my hesitations wrong, but I certainly would have hesitations and fears about moving up for a guard and losing draft capital to trade forward for a guard in this draft. I don't think that's the move personally. I'm not saying that Guyton wouldn't necessarily be a guard. I know you're talking about him really just being kind of a swing tackle for a couple of years. I'm assuming that you would just basically allow Tyler Steen to play right guard. Pastor Dro TV, what's good, buddy? My comp for Cooper is Adam Archuleta. Interesting. I like that comp. Biased, but I like him too, Justin. I just don't overhype my guys. Jets rotate their edges a lot. I doubt he will get 67% playtime for that second. Maybe, but I think it's going to be kind of tough to take Hassan off the field just because of how good he is as a pass rusher, the difference maker he can be. I think he's going to meet that 67% easy unless he gets injured. Because I think this is a guy that's really difficult to take off the field just because of how productive he is. The Jets they got guys that can play. They don't have Hassan there as a pass rusher, though. He's a little different beast as a pass rusher. P. Steve, I like Cooper as a dynamic player, as a roaming free safety, a nickel linebacker, blitzer, occasional corner on the outside, but as a Vic Fangio weapon, he would be very disruptive in the middle of the field. What's up, Eden? How you doing, man? Oh, my bad. Talk on the GM missing. First off, thank you so much for the super chat. It says, talk on the GM missing on the first rounders. Not bad on the later picks. Hope and pray, my man. EAGLES. Yeah, that's a great point to bring up there. That's something I didn't really raise that point about, is that some people have said, like, picking in the 20s, Howie doesn't have the best track record in the 20s. When you move him up inside the top 16 picks, he's been much more successful at identifying that, can't miss talent and locking those dudes up. That's fair. That's very fair. Latu, excellent rush. Yeah, definitely. Gentlemen of Culture said Cooper DeJean, Brock Bowers, Jackson Powers Johnson, Edgerrin Cooper, all on the board when the Eagles pick. Who are you taking? Look, Brock Bowers is intriguing from an offensive standpoint. I wouldn't rule out them trying to keep adding, but I would say that I don't think Jackson Powers Johnson, you could play him as a right guard. I think you got your center of the future, though, and I think JPJ would be better off as a center. I don't think that fits the greatest, although I wouldn't rule it out just because you can play right guard. Edge, I don't think the Eagles are going to go linebacker in the first round. It's not that I necessarily agree with what they're doing, but I just don't think they value the fifth-year option on linebacker, unfortunately. I think that pick would probably be Cooper DeJean, if I'm being honest, gentleman of culture. That's why I think it would be. What's up, Kenneth? He said, I'm starting to love the idea of Nate Wiggins for Philly. I got some thoughts on that, man. I'm not saying that Nate Wiggins would not be a good pick. I am saying that he would be an odd fit for Vic Fangio. Fangio uses some man principles, but Nate Wiggins is a man coverage guy. Heavy man coverage. One of the more utilized man coverage guys in all NCAA. Good coverage guy. Have to see how he would be inside of his own system, though. Let's see how that fit would be. Like, it's a projection, It's like we talked about earlier about Cooper DeJean going to a man coverage team. It's not really what his MO has been in college, so you'd be making a projection. Doesn't mean the projection's right or wrong. It just means, it's not based upon college scheme. You know what I mean? You're making a projection that, okay, even though he didn't do this in college, we feel the underlying abilities there. Sorry, guys, this thing's getting stuck now. Eagles first round pick needs to be a defensive player. What's up, Kyle? How you doing, buddy? Have you looked at Andrew Phillips? Here he is moving up boards. I have not yet. I know you're talking about, but no, I haven't yet. Sorry, Jess. You say Bowers are the best player available? Richie said Cooper DeJean is positionless. What is he, a safety or cornerback? The saying in the NFL is if you have two quarterbacks, you don't have a quarterback. DeJean needs to have a defined position. I think he will, Richie. I would be willing to bet that depending on the organization, his alignment can change. Not every organization is going to see him the same way, Richie. I think some will see him as a tall slot. I think some will see him as a boundary corner, and I think that's where the Eagles would view him as more as a boundary corner. I personally love his fit as a strong side safety. I think him being a strong safety, the way he could lock up and match up with tight ends, taller, more physical receivers, his ability to see and process information from the offense and being able to basically play 2-to-1 out there, especially if you're running like a Fangio system where you're going to be playing a lot of quarters or mixed coverages where your quarters are one side and cover 2 or cover 3 to the opposite side of the field. I think I think he would be a really good fit in that particular side. So I would say with us, he's either going to be a boundary or probably like a strong side, but I do think there is a certain segment of teams that might view him as a tall slot. I mean, I doubt he'll be a first-round pick if they're viewing him as a slot. I know you can make the argument that, basically what was Brian Branch, but I don't know that that's what Brian Branch was viewed as originally when he was drafted, if I'm not mistaken. But Branch went really high in his second round, didn't he? I think Brian, let me look up Brian Branch. I remember him getting drafted, but I don't remember if it was, I think it was a very high second round. Brian Branch came off the board. The guy listed as a safety here, but I thought he played nickel last year primarily. 12 games, 9 passes. Yeah, second round, pick 45. Oh, wow, he lasted longer in the second round. Never mind, guys. He actually lasted longer in the second round than I thought. He was kind of more towards the mid area, just outside the top 10 picks of the second round. Late 2 could be elite. His film looks different. Numbers were great, but he also passes the eye test. What's up, Trill Will? How you doing, buddy? Yeah, it's going to come down to his medicals, man. It's going to really come down to the medicals there. Eagles don't draft for need. That's what mid teams do. It's always about the future. A lot of set for 2 to 3 seasons too, and was worth it. Yeah, you're also talking about a 7th round pick though, easy compared to a first round pick. I don't think that's necessarily apples to apples because they tried to do the same thing with Dillard. That didn't exactly work, man. I would say there's a balance to that. I understand what you're trying to say here, but there's a little cap to that though too. You're still drafting need. You're drafting for a position of need that has future consequence. Also, that fits the contract structure you want. So they're not going to like the problem with drafting certain like linebacker. Like I'm not saying the Eagles will never draft linebacker easy in the first round, but I think the reason we haven't seen that is they don't value the 5th-year option on a linebacker. I don't think they view that as being idealized. So I think that's why they differentiate away from doing that. Why they don't want to do that. They're not differentiate, but indifferent to doing that. So I mean, yeah, it's going to be interesting, man. I don't think that's the right move right now, guys. Just because I think you do need, I think you need young answers in the secondary. Easy, to be honest with you. I think you could definitely use a right guard. I don't think the pressure is on for right tackle right now. You could draft a guy, of course, that can plug in at right guard, just like you did this past season, where you drafted a center that was playing right guard the year prior. So you could play, you could draft a future right tackle that you're going to plug in at right guard until Lane moves. It's possible. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. There's always different ways to skin the cat. You know what I mean? Easy, but I do think there's a balance to this. There's a balance to need versus long-term need versus the draft valuation in terms of the contract stuff. DeJean plays slot, safety, cornerback, and punt returner, whatever you need. Yeah. So I don't know if you understand about wearing green in Brazil. The Birds should use the throwback yellow and blue for that game. Green Bay is a good team, and we need to start off fast. It's going to be I hate that's a Friday game. I hate that's a Friday game. That stinks, but it's cool, though. Michigan won a championship, had a quarterback projected as a top 10 pick, and relied on the run with defenses putting 8 in the box. Is Blake Corum being underrated? I mean, Lonely B, you made a pretty dang good convincing case there, sir. It's tough when you're looking at running backs, just because obviously the better your offensive line is, the easier it is for life for these running backs. We have to see where that positioning comes, Lonely B. Just because the dominant media says something, that doesn't mean that's what scouts see. You know what I mean? So I mean, the guy could go a lot higher than they're thinking in terms of the draft prowess. But if you're asking me, like, should he be getting the same hype that they've had for, guys that have come out of the last couple of years that were really firm and steady second round picks? I know obviously, last year's a little different when we did have a first round running back again, but you know what I mean? Like the last few years, the last few draft cycles, the Brees Halls and those guys, they were more second, kind of early third round guys. They were looking at, they were getting a lot of the hype, and we don't hear as much about Corum in that sense. I think, yeah, you got a point there. But I think that's more of the national media, man. I like today's signing of Uzama. I have a little bit more confidence in the tight end depth now. What he is right now, Uzama's not the same guy he was 4 or 5 years ago. Like, this is probably not the breaking case of emergency tight end for Dallas Goedert if something happens there. However, wide tight ends, inline wide tight ends are incredibly difficult to find in the league. And Uzama is a very good run blocking tight end. This guy is a really good run blocker. Physical. Him and Dallas Goedert there within this run game, if they can use some deception and some disguise and get angles, man, I'm excited to see what happens there, guys. I definitely think it's a decent signing myself. Peace, man. Hey, appreciate you, Eden. Sorry to say this to any draftee, but who is the biggest potential bust in the first round of the 2024 draft? Oh, that's a tough one because I do think sometimes there's development where development doesn't occur, but I also think sometimes guys just go to really bad schemes. I think scheme can kill you. Look, I like JJ a lot from Michigan, the quarterback there. If he goes in the first round, there's a high boom bust there with him. He doesn't have the underlying arm talent you look for in a high first round pick from the quarterback, but he's just really smart. He processes well for a quarterback. And I think that if you put him in the right system, I think you're in the right, like, I do think there's something there with him. But I think if you're a team making that selection in the first round, if that happens, you're taking a risk. I do think there's a boom bust there. Trying to think of some other pretty clear options. Chop Robinson. I think Chop Robinson's a guy that has a lot of good athleticism. The measurables are there. I think there's a lot of development that needs to occur with technique in that pass rush toolbox with him. But he's a guy that you're either going to get that one really right, or it's going to be an overdraft, right? A guy's going to require a lot of development there. So someone's either going to be really right on that pick, or it's going to require a lot of development there. There's a couple of those instances. You could go to, we were just talking about Leitu. Leitu it's not because of the talent level, but if he has a very short career because of the red flags on the injuries, obviously there's a lot of risk on that kind of pick. There's a few different weird circumstances. You could look at Tank McKinstry, with the Jones fracture to his foot. Anytime you're dealing with a guy playing corner with a fracture on the foot, you got to be a little concerned there. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think that one's a shoo-in, but I think the young man still ran pretty well given the fact that he had that kind of injury. And on top of having that type of injury, I think he was still pretty decent on the season. Like, yeah, Terrion Arnold kind of has a more impressive film and like looks like he plays with a little bit more length and stuff like that. But I actually still think that McKinstry had good film given the fact of the nature of the injury. But there's risk. There's definitely risk in some of these guys. There's no doubt about that. Tyler Guyton, the young man from Oklahoma, Lane Johnson's boy. A lot of intrigue, man. He's long, tall. This dude's going to be able to really keep you at bay if he gets that hand and footwork in sync. He's a developmental guy, though. That's not a shoo-in for year one, man. It's a dude you got to develop a little bit. But, you're either going to be really right or really wrong on that pick as well, Richie. Those are some guys that just kind of cross my mind. I'm sure there's others, but those are the guys that really cross my mind as I'm thinking about it right now. And, of course, it's not letting me get back up here. There we go. The problem is they spent 2 first on edge guys, and Jermaine is a dog. The second basically comes down to, is Will McDonald a player or not? If he develops, we're not getting it. They will keep Haas fresh. We'll see. I think he's going to hit that 67%, Bobby. I'm going to be honest with you. I think he's clearly hitting that 67% because no disrespect to any of those guys. All 3 of those guys put together aren't even close to Hassan Reddick as a pass rusher. To be honest with you, I think they let their most natural pass rusher out the door. It's who we signed and almost did an exchange. still like, it's, we'll see. I mean, I think it's going to come down, Bobby. Are they in contention and do they play games at the end of the season, Bobby? If he's at 60%, or he's at 67, 68, 69, 70% of the snaps, and there's 2 games left, and they have no chance at advancing in seed placement for the playoffs, or they're out of the playoff contention, then you got to be concerned of the dupery there, that they're going to do some funny crap to make sure they preserve their draft, from second to third round, of course. But I think it's going to depend upon circumstances on the season. What's up, Philly 559? Thoughts on a center in the draft? I think we like Cam at guard, and I'm not sure how to feel about the free agency from the Falcons we got. Now they're moving Cam to center. Cam Jurgens going to be the center. The right guard position, I think, is the one that's a little bit in limbo. It depends upon what they truly feel behind the scenes about Tyler Steen. Tyler Steen was drafted with the intention of being that. He could get relegated, though, to the Jack Driscoll and Big V role, to where he's just like that guy that comes in and plays left tackle, left guard, right tackle, depending on what happens in the course of a season where you need him. He could get relegated to that role. They could go right guard in this draft, I think. I would be shocked if they went center, just because Cam Jurgens, that's what he was drafted for. I mean, he's Kelsey handpicked him. He's the guy that has the most similar movement abilities to Kelsey that they saw come out of these draft classes in quite some time. So, I mean, that's why they drafted him. I don't think that they love him at guard, because I think they know he's a little undersized at guard. And while he did play decent, he played really well early in the year, his play faltered down the stretch because he was getting banged up and beat up a little bit. And I think that's always going to be concerned with Cam until he develops his body. Isaac Seumalo, good example of that, came in as a center through circumstances and Kelsey reviving his career. That never came to fruition, that he was going to replace Kelsey as quickly as they thought. He was undersized as a guard. I don't know if you remember that 2019 season where I think it was Poona Ford or someone from Seattle. I mean, they literally lifted Sua up in the air and moved him. But then over the course of time, from like 2016 to like 2020, Sua went from like 305 to 320 to, he got up to 335. So like you're talking about like, and that's hard. Sua was a career defensive tackle and offensive lineman, like from high school, the whole 9 yards. Cam, not so much. Cam came from a little bit more of an athletic background, being a tight end, not quite the same build. He's not also, Sua, hate to say it like this, man, but come on, man. Sua, those Samoans, man, those dudes, they're strong and they could put on some size, So, I don't know that while the physical measurements look the same from a combine standpoint, I don't know that the body types, when you get into the particulars, are exactly the same and that you could get those same results there. I think they want to keep him around that 305, 310 mark for the center. He's going to be a little bit bigger than Kelsey, but he's got a lot of those same athletic traits. So I think I think they're looking for a right guard. I would love to see Tyler Steen get an opportunity because the young man is very strong. I think he's got a nasty streak to him, but technique-wise, there was definitely some refinement that needed to occur. We'll have to see, man. We'll have to see exactly what they do. I got a few guys in the community here. My guy, Jalen Williams, goes by Free 99 on here. Jalen Williams is a former, offensive lineman. He played left guard at Virginia State. My guy, Caleb Brennan, former center, played at Charleston Southern. My guy, Mr. Sandman, he's a former nose tackle. He played up north. I can't remember exactly where he played, but he played college ball too. So yeah, I mean, we got some guys in the community that I'm going to try to get on to kind of talk a little bit about the, alignments in this offensive line, how they're looking at each of these guys, what their roles, their fits are. I'm going to get them to kind of go into a little bit of detail about the relationship and the nature between like hip mobility, length, arm reach and length, how you play that, the differences between grip strength on the inside versus arm reach and just, that shooting, that sudden, shooting of the hands on the outside. I'm going to have those guys kind of go into a little detail with that, because listening to them talk, guys, I could listen to those three guys talk for hours. Like all three of them are very intelligent. They're very knowledgeable about this stuff. Like it's insightful. It's straightforward. It's insightful. These guys can really provide a lot of context. Any outside corners in day 2 you like for us? Seems more of a slot draft. Actually, depending on how they view Max Melton, easy. I really like Max Melton. I think he could play all 3 alignments. I think you can play him as a boundary. He's got that kind of, reach and length to him. I think you can play him as a slot. He's got the underlying lateral movement ability. You just don't know how comfortable he'd be working through the junk, the traffic. Got to see how that would work out easy. He could play field. He's, like I said, he's got the underlying lateral movement ability to be able to cover that wide spread of field if you have to have him do that. He's aggressive, needs to definitely like an admirable, fights back to the football. That's what stood out to me about him. Eyes need to develop. I'm a little concerned about his eyes developing. Like, want to make sure that he's seeing things correctly at the next level. But I like Max Melton a lot. I thought his film was pretty impressive. TJ Tampa, another boundary corner. Guy's playing down there somewhere in South Florida. Another guy, he's a good football player. Got the appropriate height, length you look for to play on the boundary. Probably more of a day 2 pick, to be quite honest. There's a couple other guys, we could talk about Rake Straw and those dudes too. We're definitely like easy. That's why I'm gonna try to keep doing this every day. I'm gonna bring a new guy. We're gonna talk about him. We're gonna do mock drafts, and we're gonna do all that stuff, man. Like, we're gonna definitely do all that. Corum is a grinder with a recent knee surgery. Do like him, but the Eagles want home run hitters. Yeah. Jazz said Wiggins and I break things. What's up, Matt? How you doing, buddy? Says Steve, the smartest Eagles content creator in the biz. Keep up the good work, my man. I appreciate that, man. Keep in mind, DeJean didn't do agility drills for a reason. We don't need another corner with bad hips. That's why I think he's a boundary. Easy. I think he's a boundary corner. I think he's a boundary corner, or he's going to play. He's going to either play, in my opinion, for the Eagles, either a strong safety role, or he's going to play boundary corner. Optimus Prime Ribs. I like that name. Hey, yo, where Mike at? He was on here. We were talking earlier. He was one of the first people to drop a comment. We're going to work something out. Mike, LB, myself, Philly Fresh. We're going to work something out, guys. We're going to do draft coverage, guys. Hips wasn't his problem. The broken leg was. Branch also played safety and base for most of the season. I hope we were going to take Branch at the Smith pick. Yeah, I mean, it is what it is, guys. I don't know if you understand about the stadium wearing green and blue. I don't. 1946 infidel, proud infidel. I don't. That's new to me, man. I'm trying to think if I've ever been there. Yeah, I have been to Brazil when I was in the military. I was stupid though. I was a kid. Like, I was a child, man. I was a child in the military. I didn't know anything. Like, I went on a world cruise and we stopped and we ported in Brazil. I don't know. I don't know much there. I couldn't tell you. I mean, you'd have to give me the context there. I don't know. I don't know, proud infidel. Gate reason I say RT is because the good corners won't fall to us in the first, and I'm not high on the edge class outside of Latu. I think that there's definitely some. I actually like the edge class easy. I don't think there's top line talent. I think there's some guys that are developmental, but I don't think they have to necessarily be day 1 picks, to be fair. I think there's some guys that fit Fangio's style of play that you can get in day 3, actually. I don't think they would have 2 teams who wear green in that stadium if they didn't clear it. Bobby said, I've heard from someone who worked for the team at the time that if Kuechly fell to the Eagles, he 100% was going to be the pick. If there was the right guy, they would take one. It's circumstance. I mean, I don't know. I can't say that Bobby, I'm not there. I'm not inside the office. I don't know about Kuechly. I heard about CMC, running back position, where you make a lot of the same claims that they generally speaking are not going to want to carry the 5th-year option on a running back, but they viewed a guy like, what I'm saying, essentially they viewed CMC as being a weapon and more than just a running back. And they would have gladly taken the potential 5th-year option if they, for contract structure reasons, if they had to there. I don't know about Kuechly, man. It's the first time I'm hearing it, Bobby, to be honest. But I think you can use the CMC example to kind of get the same point across you're trying to get, which is circumstance depending on the particular type of player. A lot of injured guys. I like Zinter particularly. Could you see a trade back from 22, maybe get a couple picks for next year and get in the high second round, 34 to 40? I hope we would also still keep picks in this year's draft tank. Yeah, I mean, if the guy's not there that they want, if the board just falls completely wrong for the Eagles, sure. I think Cooper DeJean is kind of, for me, is like that last line of defensive backs I would consider in the first round. I think once you get kind of past Cooper DeJean, in terms of the way I have these guys ranked, I think that you could just pretty much pull quality corners out in round 2, or if you even trade back into the early round 3 part, you can still probably pull one of these guys out, to be honest, and have something there worth developing. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, the Eagles are funny about corners. Like, I've learned to be careful when it comes to cornerbacks in Philly because, we had like how many drafts in a row where we kept begging them to take a corner. I remember the Asante Samuel Jr. draft in particular in the second round of that draft where we were all losing our minds. But yeah, I mean, they're particular about the way they work their draft boards in terms of like position grading. I believe how he doesn't value linebackers because Jim Johnson, rest in peace, was so heavy-handed as a genius D coordinator. He never relied on a read and react linebacker because he was a chess master. TJ on Stole Patrol. Ugh. This draft is going to make this season, yes or no? I hope Howie will knock it out of the park. I don't know if it makes the season. That's tough to say, 1946, Proud Infidel, but I will say that this draft is important for the setup of future contracts, okay? Everyone, we talked about this earlier where we talked about A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith, and the situation there. I think a lot of people are saying like, oh, like next year you have to move on from A.J. Brown. I don't necessarily think that's 100%, like a necessity. Like there can still be a bridge that gets amended there just by restructuring contract and giving a mini extension. But if you mess up your draft classes, okay, if you start missing on the corners you select and you got to go in the free agency market to pull that corner, you start missing on the edge players and you got to go in the free agency to pull that edge player. If you miss on, a handful of guys, positions, right? Now Jalen Carter's coming due. You miss on that right tackle. And now, you know what I'm saying? Like you start to really put yourself in a problem here, right? Because while Lane's contract will fall off around that time and things like, assuming Lane only plays another year or two, like you can quickly put yourself in a position where you do have to move off of one of the receivers because you didn't draft well enough to cover yourself, right? So I do think that that's important for keeping the nucleus together. Tight end's another one, right? Dallas Goedert. We had a really great succession plan from Ertz to Goddard. We need similar success here from Goddard to who comes next. Like if any of those, if you start missing on a percentage of those and you got to really start getting heavy into the trade market, into free agency, it's going to cost you. It's going to cost you, right? I mean, we saw that with receiver. I mean, part of the reason that we're so heavy in the possibility of paying two guys is because we missed on so many consecutive picks on receiver. And some of those, first, second round picks were premium picks that we missed the evaluation on them. We got it wrong. So, I mean, like to me, like that's where I think this draft is important, right? So we talk about, we know there's going to come a point to where you got to separate the parties. You can't keep both guys permanently. But I do think that this thing can last a little longer than people are insinuating by just having solid drafts where you have a young core coming behind you still on rookie contracts can help you spread some of that money out for a little longer than what people are anticipating. It's Moneyball though. It's Moneyball, Proud Infidel. I think this is, one of the ways that you play the Moneyball game. And we've been fortunate. I'll be honest with you. The fact that we've been so freaking good at the undrafted free agent market, that has saved our tail a couple of times. Those guys deserve a lot of credit. How we never adjusted to not having Jim Johnson. I think Ricky Purcell would be a sneaky great addition if they can get him in rounds 3 or 4. Jackson Power Johnson is the guy the Eagles take if he's on the board. We'll see. Late 2 is 24 as well. I'll be honest with you, Aka, my honest to God belief is that if they don't trade forward and they're sticking at 22, if Troy Fontanu is on the board, that's where they're going. I mean, dude's had 2 consecutive visits with Stoutland. Stoutland likes him. I think that's where I think that's the safety net. I think that's where, Now, I think the thing is are they going to trade? That's the question, really. Pearsall with the second or not at all. Neither did Andy until he left Philly. This draft is going to make or break the season yesterday. Oh, yeah, I answered that one. Richie said, Occam Razor brought him up. Should the Eagles get into a bidding war with Dallas, Pittsburgh, and Miami for the right to draft Powers Johnson? I wouldn't. I think he's a guy that can play right guard, but I think there are better options at right guard. And I think Cam Jurgens is going to be the guy that fits our system better as the center. I don't think it's not for me. Not for me. I wouldn't get into a bidding war there for that particular situation. I think there's a lot of guys that are probably going to be better suited to play right guard for the Eagles, to be honest. It's not that I'm saying I don't think that Powers Johnson couldn't play the role, but I think there are guys that are going to be a little better in the league at it. This draft is going. Yeah, we went over that one. What's up, Big Birds? How you doing? Yo, how's it going, Gate? I just need Howie to get us a day one starter on defense, or at least a guy who makes a big impact year one in the first round. Nick seemed non-committal when the media brought up Cam at center during the NFL draft media conference. It was very strange, almost a deflection. Weird. No, it's not. It's just Nick being Nick. Everyone knows it's going to be Cam, man. It's Cam Jurgens going to be the center, guys. Cooper DeJean or Graham Barton at 22. I would take Cooper. I think it's a little early for Graham, although I like him. I got a chance to watch him play quite a bit here in North Carolina. He played down there at Duke. I think he is going to project pretty well as a guard, but he's another one of these guys that primarily played tackle that they're going to have to kick inside the guard. But yeah, I like Graham Barton's film. He's a good player. I don't want to give too many compliments to Duke because, I got some people in this community who are Duke fans, and I don't like Duke. I'm an NC State guy. Would take Melton for defensive back for sure. Yeah, I love this film, Jazz. I thought he was really good. TJ Tampa's another guy I think is a little underrated in this class, but I think some of these dudes are very specific scheme fits. Like I'm talking about Cooper DeJean. I don't think Cooper DeJean is the flavor for every single team. I think you need to be a fairly zone-heavy team for him to fit with you. Or you're going off a major projection. I'm not saying they'll be wrong on a projection, but you know what I mean. Get those 3 guys from Voltron and create a super channel. Offense or defense at 22. I'm of the opinion you go BPA, Matt. It's the best player available at a position of need, right? You got a long-term need there. You take the best guy that can fill that role, whether it's offense, whether it's defense. I do think that somewhere before the end of day 2, the Eagles need to address the secondary. They need to address outside corner, in my opinion. But I'm not going to sit here and wager on that just because I've watched the Eagles not do that draft after draft after draft after draft. So it's not something I would necessarily wager on. It's just a personal opinion on it. It honestly feels like Max Melton is going top 40 with all the hype. I could see the Ravens or Chiefs grabbing him at the end of round 1 at this point. Great athlete. Everyone loves the tape. What I've heard, Bobby, and mind you, it's early. Things can change in 2 weeks. But what I heard is actually end of second, beginning of third. I don't know if that's going to work out to be true, Bobby, but that's what I heard reported to me. If you truly study this draft class, you'll see there will be a lot of sleepers in the later rounds. It's interesting because a lot of the actual a lot of the executives across the league are actually saying they don't love the late rounds here in this one. But they've been wrong about a lot of stuff. to be fair, Proud Infidel, they're not always right about stuff. You know what I mean? Has any NFL team won a Super Bowl with an interim head coach? It would be too much for Kellen Moore to run the offense and be the head coach. If Sirianni gets fired to the season, trouble ahead. Well, I mean, yeah, if you fire Sirianni, it's because there's a complete and utter collapse. I don't think that's going to happen, though, Richie, to be honest. I think we're going to be fine. Corinthians' biggest rivals are across city team Palmeiras. Who play in green. Okay. Makes more sense, guys. I appreciate that. Context, now I get it now. Lizzie, what's good, buddy? So what's up, Gate? Do you see a scenario where we land Lad McConkey? I love him on day 2. He'll be a stud anywhere. Actually, I don't know how true some of this stuff is. You know what I mean, guys? I mean, season of deception. Keep that crap in mind, guys. They lie about stuff. But I've heard McConkey's name get mentioned actually around the 20s. And he was brought up as someone the Eagles could potentially go after. I don't know how true that is. I mean, but, they're saying do not rule out because of the situation with AJ, because of the situation with Devontae right now, the uncertainty behind that. They know that going forward, they've got to have answers. Do not rule out a first or second round receiver. We'll see. Sion in the second can play defense and offense. Huh. Interesting. Mullins said, who would you pick at 22 Gate? It depends on who's available. Honestly, Mullins, it's hard to say. I mean, I'd have to see how the way the board falls. I'm in favor of adding talent to the secondary. I think if you can't get talent in the secondary, I think the most obvious need with value is going to be someone that can plug in and play right guard inside of this system. Outside of that, I would say there is an outside need for like a receiver. Like if the right guy, like, because here's the thing. If you stack up 21 players and the way they keep saying, like they're projecting more than 21 guys to go before the Eagles pick, somebody's got to fall. Like, I just don't know what position it'll be. And we're hoping it's at a position the Eagles kind of have that long-term need for, there's the long-term need to address that position. So, I mean, that's going to be the thing. I mean, I would love to add some kind of talent to the secondary just because I think we're a lot of darts at the board. I don't know that anything's going to stick though. I think we need a centerpiece that we can build around there. Outside of that, I think it's just going to depend, man. I mean, some people were talking about that earlier on. We were having a conversation that someone said they heard through the grapevine. Someone within the front office told them that if Luke Kuechly would have made his way down to where the Eagles were picking during that draft, that they would have taken him at linebacker. So the assumption being, we all heard about CMC. It's first heard about the Kuechly thing, but CMC is definitely an example I've heard of before. That if the right guy's there, they may actually pick a linebacker that high. I don't know. I mean, be interesting to see, man. I mean, if they don't love what's in front of them and they just think that Edgerrin Cooper or Peyton Wilson's going to be a Luke Kuechly type impact guy, I'm not saying that they're going to be apples for apples, the same type of players. When I say these names, guys, I don't think I'm saying they're exactly this player. I'm just saying the impact upon the scheme for the defense. If they think that, Derek Brooks level impact for Tampa Bay, right? Luke Kuechly with Carolina, Brian Urlacher with Chicago. If you think Wilson, or if you think that Cooper can have that kind of impact as a linebacker on Vic Fangio's Eagles scheme and system, I think that's what they're implying with that. Is that if that's the grade they have on them, then they'll take that 5th-year option and they'll buck the trend of not taking linebackers since 1980 in the first round or 1979, something like that. I think it was 79 actually. Howie won at Surtain and the Chiefs kid. It's sometimes just unfortunate. Yeah, circumstance. This draft is unpredictable, but I feel like the Birds will ultimately trade up for their guy. If Arnold or one of the linemen falls out of the top 10, Howie's moving. It's possible, Glizzy. He's done it consecutive drafts. He's moved the board. That 19 and 20 draft is the reason our back 7 is so bad. 1,000% easy. No argument for me on that one, man. The stadium is the home field, and their enemy wears green, just like Eagles. Dallas comes to mind. We're playing Green Bay, so might help. Really, those soccer fans in that stadium are nuts. Yeah. I've seen, when I was in Portugal, I went to a game, and yeah, man, it's not what I thought it was, man. They're not passive fans. They're definitely over the top. Steve, do you know if Carolina is shopping Horn at all? There's been some rumors on sports radio in North Carolina that Horn could potentially be up for trade, but I haven't heard anything definitive, just rumors. But it is on the radio here in North Carolina. They've been discussing it. Don't like Cooper. He's not a number 1 pick. He's basically Reed Blankenship. He's a 2 or 3 pick. We are reaching. I don't know, man. I saw his film. I liked him, Henry. I think Reed Blankenship was an undrafted free agent, man. I think that's a difficult evaluation to try to compare the draft stock of those two guys. Do you think we make a blockbuster trade? I was going to say May. I saw you said make a blockbuster trade like AJ on draft night. If so, who are some names to look for? Corner position they could. That's what I was talking about though, Glizzy. Like if we keep missing on these draft picks, we have to keep drafting in order to shore it up. It makes it hard to sustain the nucleus of the team. You can't have 2 guys at $25 million if you're also paying a corner $25 million, an edge rusher $25 million. You know what I mean? Like a quarterback, $40 million at some point. Like it makes it harder to kind of sustain that. Then you're going to have. Luckily, our offensive line is kind of coming down into reasonable terms, just because we're going to get younger. But you want to be able to detract financially from spots to then influx for a couple of years at other spots and then kind of work its way out. But yeah. Surtain still not extended. Keep that in mind. Cooper John was an explosive returner. That's a sign of his quickness and agility. Did you get his cone drill numbers from the pro day? Let me look him up real quick. I can take a look real quick, Mr. Sandman. Cooper Sean pro day. Should have just typed in Iowa pro day. Let's see. SI's got something on him. The draft wire did too, but let me see if SI has the recorded numbers. According to 33rd team and other reports, DeJean ran his 40-yard dash in 4.43, 38.5-inch vertical, 10'4" broad jump, 36'1.5", 203 pounds. Let me see if it does any lateral movements. 16 reps on the bench. I'm looking at his RAS score real quick. Yeah, no agility testing is showing on the RAS. But yeah, normally a punt returner has got agility, Mr. Salmon. I'm in agreement with you there that normally it's an indicator a guy's got pretty fluid hips to be a punt returner. A little, difference between kick returner and punt returner. There's an elusiveness that comes to punt returning. A slot receiver in the first. I don't necessarily know that they're going slot easy. If they go receiver. I think it depends upon, how Nick does this thing where he doesn't believe in alignment when it comes to, like designating alignment when it comes to receivers. Well, we'll see. I would say that with the situation that's going on right now, I would not get cute if they're going to move on from AJ. And I don't think it's smart to do it. But if they're going to move on from AJ, you better have a boundary. You better have a boundary on that roster, man. You better have a prospect, or it's going to get ugly. Eagles have a stacked roster. Is there anyone in the draft that you think can be a day 1 starter? Yeah, I do, Mr. Sandman. I think Cooper DeJean, if they move Bradbury, they add Cooper DeJean, they play him at as boundary corner. I think he could be a day 1 starter for the Eagles. I think Troy Fontanu, the young man we talked about yesterday, I think he could be a day 1 starter at right guard. The Eagles wanted him to play that. I think depending on linebacker in the position there, first or second round, I don't know if they go linebacker in the first round. It's hard to state that, man. They just haven't done it since 79. But, an early pick at linebacker, I think there is the outside potential of that player starting. Receiver, I definitely think, adding receiver. First, second round guy, high draft pick there. I think there's a, pretty high probability that guy is going to get significant playing time that could, depending on how you want to qualify it. I don't know if they're going to necessarily come out 11 personnel as a starter, but from a snap count standpoint, they're going to play snaps. I'm trying to think where else would there be an opportunity to play. Receiver, potentially. Right guard, I think. depending on the tight end and the prospect and where they're selected and how much 12-man personnel we ran, I mean, there could be some quasi starting stuff there. Outside corner, nickel corner, I think is still up for debate and argument for what they're going to do there. I think Avonte Maddox has the lead for that because, if he's healthy, he's a good corner, but he just hasn't been healthy. So he's going to have to prove that. Yeah, I think that's pretty much it, man, I could think of. I mean, I don't think anyone's going to start over Josh Sweat while he's still on the roster. Maybe there's split time, but you got Nolan Smith's a former first-round pick. They're going to play him this year, Mr. Sandman. You know what I mean? Like, he's going to get on the field. I don't know. It's a great question, man. I think there's only maybe 3 or 4 alignments, to be quite honest, where there's the potential for starting. Ricky Pearsall would be nice. Sion is a good safety, but he ended up playing halfback against USC, and he was pretty incredible. I love Malachi Corley and Ania Smith. Oh, yeah, receiving options? Yeah. (1946) says, how he's going to be dealing like my ex-wife, huh? we never know with him. Plus, we have a new coaching staff. It's true. Ricky Pearsall in rounds 2 to 4 would be a nice addition. A guard tackle like Latham would start and work for me. Horn for a second. I'd send Goddard for Horn straight up. Would Carolina take Goddard for Horn? Probably. They got a young quarterback having that safety blanket. I don't know if I trade Goddard, but because I don't think you have that answer there. Even though I do think Goddard's going to be phased out in the next couple of years, but it's kind of a tough one. What impressed me about Cooper in coverage was his ability to read wide receiver routes. Yeah, his processing. Yeah, I agree with you. He doesn't have a lot of wasted movement, and he doesn't bite on double moves. Yeah, I don't think DeJean did. Yeah, I don't see anything reported for agility. Cooper's only weakness to me, I've watched all 22 from the last 2 seasons. A good receiver outside, jab step to inside move gets him, but he's a missile making up speed to stop receivers. Like a coach on the field, Sandman, Ferentz called him the best player he has ever coached. What's up, Fly Parks? He says, Steve, you see this kid as a safety or a corner? For me, he's either a boundary corner or he's a strong safety. That's what I see him inside of Vic's system. I think if the Eagles are drafting him, especially in the first round, they're going to play him as a boundary corner. That would be my opinion. Gate, I meant would a slot like Ladd go first? It's an excellent question, Easy. Historically speaking, it doesn't happen very often. I'm not going to say it never happens. It does happen from time to time, but a lot of times that's when people misattribute the player. JJ, you know what I mean? Justin Jefferson, where they said he was only going to be a slot in the league. They were wrong. It's rare, but it could happen. It's the rumor mill. Easy. I mean, I don't know if he's going to go in the first round, but that was definitely the rumor mill that he's going to go somewhere in the 20s. That some of these front offices are falling in love with him. What's up, Kelly Green Batman? What do you think of Johnny Wilson, 6'7" wide receiver? First off, hang on, I got a few guys in here that I know, but I hate Florida State. Tall, lanky receiver. Had a couple big moments against NC State. Not a big fan of him. It's going to be interesting to see what he can do at the next level. I don't think he was super, super productive, but there was also some extenuating circumstances behind Johnny Wilson's lack of productivity. And to be fair, when we go back and we look at the draft class and we look at guys like DK Metcalf, he was productive when he was on the field, but I mean, because of extenuating circumstances, his production was kind of wavering in college. Turned out to be a pretty dang good professional. I do think this guy's Johnny Wilson's likely going to be a day 3 pick, though. Maybe slips into day 2, but I think he's more of a day 3 pick. Yeah. Fontano looks like a player. I agree. Gets yeah, it looks like me too. Philly talk, you still here? I think Chop would be a nice rotational piece for the D line, second rounder though. In my opinion, Peyton Wilson would take Dean's spot. He'd start right out of camp. I'm an NC State guy, man. I've had an opportunity to watch Peyton play quite a bit. Super productive at NC State. Very reactive. He's definitely a see it and shoot the gap kind of guy. He's a little similar, to be honest with you, to Kobe Dean, to be real. Good coverage guy, though. I think he's a little bit more solidified in coverage than Kobe was coming out of college. The thing that's going to get him in trouble is if he gets worked up to, he doesn't have the greatest length for a linebacker, and he can get a little bit stacked. You know, where he's supposed to stack and shed, he can get stacked himself and kind of moved. That's where he's going to struggle. He's got to definitely read it quickly and get there. But Peyton Wilson's an incredible athlete. One of my favorite players who have watched at NC State for a while, Bob. Hey, my friend, I want to toot my horn in saying I had season passes since the vet. Remember when we had Buddy Ball and stopped a goal line stance, 7 attempts from the 3, and we got the ball back? Yes, sir. I was young, but yes, sir. Josh Susan, yeah, Cooper is a natural. Reminds me of Jalen Carter, where he does things. It's really hard to coach. You either have it or you don't. Highly skilled athlete. All right, guys. I appreciate y'all so much. I'm going to jump off of here, guys. I apologize, but it's about nap time for this baby. I got to put her down. But we'll be back tomorrow, and we'll probably keep this. What's up, Michael? Let me say hey before I jump off, man. What's up, Michael? There will be a good player at 22. We just can't know what position it'll be. It could easily turn out the players the Eagles like are gone. The good player is a defensive tackle, and Eagles try to trade back. Byron Murphy. I would take Byron Murphy in a heartbeat. Lonely B. I'm an Eagles fan. I was at that game. Oh, that's cool, bro. What time? We'll be back tomorrow around 7, 8 o'clock. I'll send out a notification, guys. It'll be around 7, 8 p.m. We'll go live. Good night, Coach. Hey, I appreciate y'all guys so much, man. All right, guys. We'll talk a little, maybe some Nate Wiggins tomorrow. We'll pull up some Nate Wiggins tape, and we'll talk a little bit about Nate Wiggins, the underlying data and stuff like that on him. All right, guys. Peace. I'm out.